The first week of free agency, it was brisk and kind of exciting, at least briefly, but with the top pieces off the board, it slowed down a bit, and we can start sifting through the developments to get a feel for some of the initial values. I'm Bob Harris. This is the Audible channel, and it's time to go on the hot seat. Footballguys.com, that's the website. You'll find me here every Tuesday throughout the offseason, touching on topics of interest to fantasy investors. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, comment, do all that kind of YouTube stuff, if you like us or not. The hot seat's all about the guests, and I have a great one this week. You know him as Dave Kluge. So do I, because he is Dave Kluge, my Football Guys colleague. Dave, how's it going, man?
Going great. This is always one of my favorite times of the year to do a show with you. I don't know if you remember last year, Bob. We didn't even
Yep.
have it planned. It was shortly after you joined the Football Guys staff, and it was Monday afternoon. And we said, "There's a lot of news to cover, and nobody's got a show planned today." Hey, Bob, what are you doing in 10 minutes? You want to hop on and discuss some free agency? So I don't know. Let's make this an annual thing where we get to do a little post free agency discussion. I like it.
I agree. And so, kind of like I said, it got off to a fast start, then it kind of slowed down. Then
Yeah.
Sunday night, as we're recording this for Tuesday viewing, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins both got their deals done with the Bengals. Jamar Chase becomes the highest paid non quarterback in the NFL of north of $40 million a year. T. Higgins, the highest paid wide receiver two in the NFL. I think he's got $112 million deal, $115 million deal. It's real money and a fair amount of it guaranteed in both cases. And Joe Burrow making $55 million, but it lowers the cap. Maybe they can still keep Trey Hendrickson. But what do you think about this offense in general? Like, especially for like dynasty investors, is this is just like a golden moment?
Yeah, I think these next 4 years for Cincinnati are going to be unbelievable. I mean, I can't remember ever seeing a trio like this locked up for this amount of time. And this isn't, something that they're hoping is going to pan out. This is an offensive trio that we've already seen proven success with. Now, my biggest hope here is that T. Higgins stays a little bit healthier now that he's got that money, because over the last couple of years, when he's been on contract years and when he's been on the franchise tags, we haven't really seen him rushing to get back on the field with a lot of these soft tissue injuries. Now that he's got his paycheck, hopefully that is more of a thing of the past, because when we see T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both out there with a healthy Joe Burrow, this is probably the most potent passing offense in the league. I think Joe Burrow, his stock obviously goes up. This is a guy that we're going to be projecting for near 5,000 passing yards almost every single season as long as the trio's together. T. Higgins, obviously, I think, he goes up a little bit. There were some situations that I think could have been better for him had he gone to Carolina or had he gone to the Los Angeles Chargers. And Jamar Chase, I mean, how much can you go up from where he already
Right.
is? He's the clear wide receiver one in Dynasty, redraft, the number one overall pick in redraft. So long term, this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited. And Cincinnati fans should be happy. They could have gotten it a little bit cheaper last year had they gotten the deals done.
Right.
But you know how these contracts go. 2-3 years from now, they're going to look like team friendly deals.
Right. And the way the cap's been going up, the cap went up this year, like orders of magnitude, and it's going to continue to do that. And I want to say, like Adam Schefter put out a tweet, the first 4 to 5 days of free agency, there was $4 billion worth
Whew.
of contracts handed out. I think 2 billion of it in guaranteed money. So the NFL is going to be an ongoing thing. By the way, you mentioned this offense, 2 yards a game was the number one in the NFL last year. 43 touchdowns. That 43 touchdown passes by Joe Burrow led the league as well. I think there's a lot more of that to come. Jamar Chase going as wide receiver one out there. I'm running through the best ball streets as we speak, going wide receiver, going number one overall is not unusual. Wide receiver one for sure. Higgins is going a little higher than I would have expected given the uncertainty, and maybe this will dial it back a little bit. He's going like wide receiver 14. Maybe the fact that he's going to be playing alongside Chase might slow this down. People thought he was going to be a wide receiver one. Mike Gesicki also got a new deal a little while back.
Mhm.
His value primarily comes when something's gone wrong with Higgins. So I don't think anyone should be out there running around to pay the kind of draft capital in our terms that we saw the Bengals invest in him in terms of cash. Was a pretty big deal. So that'll be interesting. So another one that kind of, came about suddenly was the Sam Darnold showing up in Seattle. Kind of not a huge surprise once we saw the moves there. Geno Smith traded to Las Vegas. There were some connections there. Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator, worked with Darnold in San Francisco for the year before he went to Minnesota. But we get Cooper Kupp now joining Darnold and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Kenneth Walker III. Should we be very excited about this, or should we temper our enthusiasm when we look at that offensive line?
Well, Bob, I don't know why you didn't mention Zach Charbonnet there. Another very good running back that I think is going
I
to be a big part
ignored
of
him.
this offense. Like, little
I'm
tongue in
trying to
cheek here.
ignore
I'm a
him.
Charbonnet fan, but I think that you look at Clint Kubiak and the way that he and his dad and everybody from that tree has kind of built their offenses. It's not uncommon to see two running backs, especially two guys that have these separate skill sets like Ken
Right.
Walker and Zach Charbonnet do. But as far as Cooper Cup, the immediate take that I saw from so many people as well, they've got two slot receivers now. Cooper Cup can do all the things Jackson Smith-Njigba can do. But we saw last year that Jackson Smith-Njigba, it wasn't asked often, but when he would play out wide, he was still pretty good in that situation. Two of his best games when DK Metcalf wasn't there
Yep.
and he was playing out wide a little bit more. So you just kind of look at how they're building this team in Seattle. I like it. And I think that kind of puts me on an island because a lot of other people don't seem to like it. Cooper Cup, people forget because of, the recent Triple Crown receiving award that he had. He's one of the best run blocking wide receivers in the league. So I think that when you put him in the slot and ask him to block, there's a lot of fun, unique ways that they can kind of build this Seattle offense, whether they want to play out of 11 personnel with MVS playing the flanker to, stretch these defenses vertically and then use Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Cup both on the underneath stuff, or if they want to play out of 12 or 21 personnel where they have Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Cup, one on each side that can contribute as blockers or get downfield and do some fun creative things. I don't think this was a bad call. When you look at them moving from Geno Smith and DK Metcalf to Sam Darnold and Cooper Cup and saving about $30 million in the process, I really kind of like this for Seattle. They've still got some question marks on the offensive and defensive line. I think that they're going to hit that heavily in the draft, but kind of like the bones that they have on this offense right now.
Yeah, I feel like John Schneider, the GM's big weakness there has been his handling of offensive line. Like I can
Mhm.
remember many years ago talking to Ted Sundquist, the former general manager of the Denver Broncos, and he would say it every time you're talking, offensive linemen don't grow on trees, right? Like that's the hardest
Mhm.
piece to go out and find. Like especially in season when you're dealing with injuries, etc. You can go grab a guy off the tractor out on the farm. He looks the part, but he is not the part, right? And
Right.
so that's going to be the issue for Seattle. As you mentioned, they'll probably invest heavily. I do like Clint Kubiak's comments about Kenneth Walker the third. Every coach who talks about him loves the speed, right?
Yeah.
But also then they come to realize that he loves the speed too, and he's a bit of a home run swinger, and that's been a little bit of an issue for him. Zach Charbonnet a little bit more efficient and can be more effective as we saw last year. So I'm with you. I'm in on Walker. I think the price is right, but the price is better on Charbonnet, and he will have a role. Another big concern as we head out through the first week of free agency. Devontae Adams signed with the Rams well in advance of that. He was cut by the Jets. But there's people wondering if he's going to cut into Puka Nakua's workload. I'm not one of those people. I wasn't necessarily one of those people who thought Blake Corum was going to cut into Kyron Williams' workload last year. Yet you saw the immediate decline in ADP for Kyron Williams. Do you think we'll see any of that for Puka? By the way, Rich Rebar had a thread out there on the X device. Puka Nacua led all wide receivers with a target share of 37% on its routes.
Yes.
That's whopping. That's the highest target rate for a wide receiver running 100 plus routes in a season in over 10 years. Do we think Devontae Adams is going to make a difference on that?
Well, I got another Puka Nacua stat for you. If you look
Go.
last year, he had games where he was ejected and games where he left with injury and games when he returned from injury where he wasn't 100%. But if you look at the games where he got his normal snap share and was not limited by injury, he was within 1 point per game of Jamar Chase last year. I mean, this
Right.
guy, you look at the overall numbers and it might look like a disappointing season, but it's really easy to contextualize because of the games missed and the games where he was playing at half speed. So I'm not worried whatsoever. I think Puka Nacua is one of the best receivers in the league. Of course, Devontae Adams is also one of the best receivers in the league. You talk about getting up there in age, and I think dynasty managers, especially this time of year, are worried about the looming age cliff. But right now, like what we've seen from Devontae Adams over the last few years is that he is still one of the best receivers in the league. So do I think that Puka Nakua's target share can go down and his targets per route run can go down? Of course, that's going to dip a little bit, but I think when you add a guy like Devontae Adams, the entire passing pie grows here. I think there's going to be more pass attempts. They talked about wanting to do some new things on offense, and I think what that means is upping the pass rate. Kyron Williams has been great so far for Sean McVay over the last couple of years, but I don't think they want him getting 20 plus touches a game. When they make an investment in a guy like Devontae Adams, that tells me they want Matthew Stafford to throw it a little bit more. So sure, the efficiency and the usage might go down a little bit for Puka Nacua, but I think that with the overall pass volume growing, you're not going to notice much of anything at all. Puka Nacua is my wide receiver 2 right now in drafts, and I'm
Mine too.
keeping him there even after this move.
I had him there. I've gone back and forth between him and Justin
Jefferson.
Jefferson for the obvious reasons. We're going to talk about him in a minute. I think some people may look at it, Garrett Wilson's numbers with the Jets when what was he, wide receiver 22, I want to say, over the 11 games that 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 Adams was there. I think that had more to do with the quarterback and the offense than it does here, and I don't think that'll be as big of an issue. I'm with you. I would like to believe that we kind of get that little bit of a discount. Like, I'm old, mean, and cheap. I like my discounts. I would like to think maybe I can grab Puka Nakua in the second half of some first rounds. I don't know that that will happen. That would kind of be more of me wish casting than setting an expectation.
I
What's the
think
right
who we
price for
will get a
Adams?
discount on, though, is Matthew Stafford next year. I think he is
Correct.
just that old quarterback that doesn't rush and nobody's going to want him. But when you've got an offense with Puka Nakua and Devontae Adams, it's not crazy to think that he can have one of those, the variance breaks the right way, and he has 45 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, and he could sneak in as a QB1 just on pass volume alone. So Matthew Stafford's going to be one of those guys that I'm going to be drafting late in a lot of leagues next year.
Especially when we look at the connections with the offenses for the Rams, and let's say the Green Bay Packers go back to when
Yep.
Devontae Adams was briefly the best goal line back in football,
Yeah.
so lining out
Yeah.
wide and taking one step back and one step into the end zone. It was almost unstoppable. So maybe Kyron Williams investors should be the ones worrying here. DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Is this a recipe for a disaster or a stroke of genius?
Maybe a little bit of both. I don't know if I expect Pickens to be on the Week 1 roster. And Bob, I don't know if you've got any insight here at all. I think that making a big investment in DK Metcalf. It seems like they kind of had this money put aside for the last couple of years, right? They were trying to get Devontae Adams last offseason. They were trying to get Brandon Ayuk, and they finally
Yep.
were able to get DK Metcalf. May have overpaid a little bit, but they got their guy. They got their wide receiver one. We have seen the Steelers are willing to kind of move on from these guys before their rookie contracts expire. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go the same route with Pickens. But if they do bring Pickens back, I think the immediate gut reaction from so many people was that these guys, similar to the JSN and Cup storyline, right? It's like, oh, they have overlapping skill sets. They have two of the same players. I don't think that's how NFL coaches and
No.
GMs that are building out teams really think about it that much. They just see they've got two very good receivers, and sure, surface level, they're both big, fast guys. So you might say that they're same players, but I think that their traits are so different.
Right.
George Pickens is more of the get downfield and make a contested catch type of guy. That is not in DK's wheelhouse. He is more of a refined receiver at this point in his career, but he does like to work underneath, get those short passes, and then rip off the big plays after the catch. So I kind of see a high-low offense here where Pickens is doing more of the downfield stuff. Metcalf can be the after the catch guy that works more across the middle of the field. I think they could work well with each other. Of course, we don't know who the quarterback is right now, and I think that's a big
That's the
question. You
issue.
put Jameis Winston or Russ Wilson in this offense, I think we could see explosions in here. But if you take a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who really builds his offense on timing and chemistry with the receivers, I think then we could be looking at less of a stroke of genius and more of a recipe for disaster.
Right. I think that people looking at the recipe for disaster see the explosiveness off the field more than on the field.
Yeah.
I've mentioned, is it possible the Pittsburgh Steelers receiving core leads the NFL in 15-yard penalties? Absolutely, with those two guys. Also, there's a little bit of the diva quotient with both of them. The Steelers have a long history of dealing with players who are divas at wide receiver, often hiding the fact that they're divas, but also being quick to move on. Sorry, Chase
Right.
Claypool. When the diva quotient is a little too high for them, they're not afraid to move on.
Or
Or
Deontay
Deontay Johnson,
Johnson.
right?
Yeah.
So it
Antonio
does happen.
Brown. It's a long list. Martavis
Right.
Bryant. We can keep going.
Right. Well, we can start with at the start with Antonio Brown, who
Right.
they just didn't care because he was so darn good. It's not until
Mhm.
they hit the point where the returns aren't coming in, and I don't know. We'll see where if we can't get there with Pickens. I'll tell you where we are in a really good spot though is in Washington. I feel like the Commanders feel like they're going to make the push with the rookie contract for Jaden Daniels. They bring in Laramie Tunsil, re-sign Zach Ertz, and they bring in Debo Samuel. I'm not a huge Debo Samuel guy, but I do think it's a good move for this offense. How high is too high for Jaden Daniels? I know he's gone from like the initial projections on Football Guys. Good work by Jason Wood there. Always, he was quarterback one. He's kind of dialed back now, moved him back down to 3. That's where he's at in my rankings right now, one ahead of Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts. How do you see him?
Yeah, I came out with my way too early rankings as soon as Week 18 ended. And I had Jaden Daniels in there as my QB3, and that's still where he is.
Right.
I think that the way he plays football sets him up for a higher ceiling. And of course, QB3, that's behind Josh Allen and behind Lamar Jackson. I think the way that he plays football, he is set up for a higher ceiling than Jalen Hurts. And I think Jalen Hurts is the safer guy. We know the Tush Push is going to be there. He's probably going to score 12 to 15 touchdowns again next year. But Jaden Daniels has that type of rushing upside like a Lamar Jackson, where he could rush for 1,000 years,
maybe
or
more.
yards. He can rip off the 80-yard touchdowns, and that's not something we really see from Jalen Hurts. So he's my QB3. I love seeing the investments made in him. I think one of the biggest weak spots last year was offensive line. So for them to go out and bring in Laramie Tunsil, I think makes a ton of sense. Debo Samuel can get him, some of those quick hitters where he can just pick up some easy passing yards there. This is exactly what you want to see a team doing. Washington is building around Daniels. They're addressing the weak points, and they're bringing back some of his favorite targets as well in Zach Ertz and John Bates. So really, really like what they're doing. Noah Brown still there as well as the wide receiver 3. A lot of good things happening. I can't put him ahead of Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but I also can't see him falling lower than QB3 where I have him.
Yeah, I think that I think that's interesting, and we'll see what we'll see how this offense. I think the concern for me is like the Cliff Kingsbury tends to wear out his welcome, right? Like
Yeah.
people get it figured out. That's been the history in the past. Maybe that's an ongoing concern. We'll find out. Third round price tag, early fourth round price tag for Jaden Daniels seems more than reasonable though to me. If you miss out on Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, I'm definitely getting ahead of them. But I think a guy that maybe will get still at a reasonable price, maybe more reasonable than we should expect. The Bears cleared the runway for Caleb Williams, right? Following the great Carolina Panthers approach, rebuilding the interior of the offensive line, 3 new pieces there. And of course, Ben Johnson. As a Bears fan, I know this is going to be hard for you. Step back and put your objective hat on. Caleb Williams, how great can he be?
Yeah, man. Raise the banner. Back to back to back offseason champs. The Bears are out here doing it. Um, it's so hard for me to sip the Kool-Aid. And I was saying this last year. I felt like I was one of the ones saying, everybody, I felt like every show I was going on last offseason, people were, how excited are you about the Bears? And then I went to the Fantasy Football and Expo in Canton. And everyone was asking me, like, how excited are you for Caleb Williams? How excited are you for the Bears? And I've learned to temper my expectations because they are good at making the big splashy free agency signings and bringing in the big head coach. What I will say, this one does feel a little bit different. This isn't me, getting totally overexcited, but they've done things this offseason that I haven't seen them do in the past. They've always been tight with their wallet, and for them to go out and splash a bunch of money on Ben Johnson really talks about the change of direction that this team is hoping to go. Building out the interior offensive line is something that they have never really invested in before, so I am happy to see that. But as a Bears fan, I need to see it before I could believe it. I think we all know the ceiling for Caleb Williams. I mean, there were some plays last year that were just jaw-dropping. You'd see him make the same plays that you saw all over his highlight reel at USC. But of course, the lack of protection made it hard for him to find any sort of consistency here. It seems like the pieces are all here now. Let's see if it comes together in week 1. I'm not willing to push Caleb Williams up too high. I'm going to be drafting him as kind of a back-end QB1 because we know the ceiling is there, but we also know there's a dangerous floor with any Chicago quarterback.
That's about where he's going. I feel like if I was getting a little more of a discount on it, I feel great.
Yeah.
The Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman are the interior linemen we're talking about. We know, Ben Johnson, that was a big deal for them in Detroit. Arguably, I think Matt Patante at Football Guys had them ranked number 1 last year. Detroit, it was between them and Philadelphia, however you saw it. The interesting
Speaking
thing
of
for me
with Matt
was
Patante, I want to say I was lucky enough to meet him in Vegas this year, and I said, Matt,
it's
your
great.
offensive line rankings are fantastic. Can you give me a little peek behind the curtain and let me know about your process? And he said one of the biggest things for him in grading offensive lines is cohesion. And how
Right.
long have these guys been playing together? So, yeah, you look at all these superstars on the Bears offensive line, but, that snap that they take in week 1 is going to be the first time they've ever actually played football together. So we'll see how they could mesh. Matt does great work on offensive line, but I can't stop thinking about that he said cohesion was one of the most important things for an offensive line unit.
I do agree with that. The coaching is a big deal too, but I go back to Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, was it in
Yeah.
Carolina? Just like that, Dave Canales talked about that going in, and I think the coaching can't be overlooked here. And coaching can't be overlooked. Shane Waldron walks out the door, or
Yeah.
is kicked out the door last year. Thomas Brown, not known as a great innovative offensive mind, all of a sudden we had like a 3-game stretch where Caleb Williams was a quarterback, like 3
Yeah.
or 4. He was quarterback
Mhm.
4 over those first 3 games. Wasn't getting sacked. A lot of that was on. A lot of the sacks were on him last year.
They were.
But it is interesting. How do we feel about DeAndre Swift there right now with Ben Johnson coming back? They had a year together in Detroit.
I think he is gone. It just wasn't a good fit. That was the year that we saw Jamal Williams kind of take over as the RB1, and people are quick to point out that on a per game basis that season, DeAndre Swift was still an RB2. Almost all of his usage came in the receiving game. Now, I don't know. Maybe the Bears don't want to take it on the chin. They'd have to eat about $8 million if they release DeAndre Swift. But I think that running back is still a pretty big position of need for them. So I'm not crazy about taking Ashton Jinty at number one overall, or not number one overall, but in the first round for the Bears, their 10th overall pick. But they have two picks in round two at 39 and 41. And I'd really expect them to use one of those picks on running back. Now, if they get lucky enough that, like, Marion Hampton falls to them in
Right.
round two, that's a great pick. But even if he's not there, Quinshon Judkins,
Sure.
Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson, there's still a lot of really good running backs that they can take at the top of round two. And all of those guys complement Swift pretty well. I think Travion Henderson is the one that if they bring him in, then they try to move DeAndre Swift for whatever day three pick they can get.
Yeah, as we talk about these rookies, everyone go out and check out the Football Guys rookie draft guide. It's available. Version 2 is up, free to download. Go to footballguys.com/rookie guide. Get all the great work. Dave has been putting a lot of effort into that, along with our usual crew, Jeff Bell, Mike Kashuba, Alfredo Brown, the team putting together great graphics, updated with all the combine information, new profiles as necessary, all the RAS scores in addition, right, Dave? So plenty of good info in there, and get it while you can before version 3 comes out. And like just great content. I've been using it religiously, well ahead of the curve on where I am usually with rookies. So good stuff there. Check that out. The Vikings wide receivers. There was some concern. I think somebody wrote about the possibility of Jory Epstein from USA Today wrote about concern about whiplash for the switching
Yeah.
quarterbacks rooms for Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson as well. Couple thoughts here. Uh, I feel like Justin Jefferson is quarterback proof. Why? Because he is. He's proved it. What last year? Kirk Cousins goes down a week 8. Jefferson was down, came back the last 5 games. He was wide receiver 3, playing with what Jaron Hall, Josh Dobbs,
Nick
and Nick
Mullins.
Mullins.
Yeah.
Like so. I think they got that part figured out. But just in general, what's your level of concern as you sit here and you maybe ponder the fortunes going forward? Your level of confidence in JJ McCarthy. Could they make another move? I mean, I know that's been floating around out there. Seems unlikely to me, but where are you at on this?
Yeah, I think it probably is unlikely, but you still have to look at the team. They didn't offer Sam Darnold the same that Seattle offered him, but they tried to retain Sam
They
Darnold
did.
and they tried to retain Daniel Jones. And there's rumors about Jameis Winston and there's rumors about Aaron Rodgers. It is weird that they invested, top 10 pick in JJ McCarthy last year and are still kind of spinning the QB wheels. But then you look at the depth chart and they literally don't have a QB2. Right now
Right.
it is JJ McCarthy with nobody behind him. Now, when you start throwing around a name like Aaron Rodgers, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is interested in going anywhere to play backup, but I think that does kind of tell you why they were interested in Daniel Jones and Jameis Winston as a potential backup. But I do have some concerns, man. JJ McCarthy, 22 years old, and I know we're rehashing all the same things we said last year. It's Sam Darnold. How are these guys going
Still
to?
situation.
I think Justin Jefferson is going to be pretty safe because he's Justin Jefferson. And anytime he gets a ball in his hands, he can score a touchdown. He doesn't need the most accurate passes to come down with the ball. He's Justin Jefferson. He's going to do what he can do. But you look at the offense that was run at Michigan when JJ McCarthy was there, it was very much so a smash mouth run first football team. They've never asked him to throw a ton. So you see the pass volume last year and you see the pass volume the years before with Kirk Cousins. I don't know if we're going to see that same volume. So I think that for Justin Jefferson to give you the top 3 upside that he's been giving us in previous years, he's going to need to be very efficient, which can absolutely happen. But I think the floor for Justin Jefferson still, no lower than wide receiver 10. If he's out there, he's going to give you
Sure.
top 10 production. But JJ McCarthy does set up a really wide range of outcomes for TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. Those are the
Right.
guys that I'm a little bit more concerned about.
Yeah, Addison, I'm a little concerned about just like the touchdown heavy nature of his game last year is as well. Perhaps that explains the addition of Jordan Addison after
Mm.
re-signing Aaron Jones to a pretty solid 2-year contract. Jones, an older player, plus 30 years old, coming off season career highs, I believe, in carries, touches, snaps, the whole 9 yards. But he was on the field all 17 games, which I feel like maybe surprised even the Vikings. Where are we at? Like Aaron Jones was going at a really reasonable price. I want to say you could get him at the tail end of the running back 2s, maybe even the running back 3 range. I think he maybe gets it even a little cheaper out of people being concerned that Jordan Mason's going to cut into his workload. I think we always feel that with the backup there. Is it necessarily the case?
I'm not too worried about Jordan Mason. Let's just put it this way. I was worried last year about Ty Chandler, and he, when given the opportunities, didn't really do too much. And Aaron Jones was clearly the guy there. And then they traded for Cam Akers midseason, and everyone said, well, that's the end for Aaron Jones. And guess what? Cam Akers did a lot of nothing while Aaron Jones continued to be an RB1. And now this year, Jordan Mason, it's the same story all over again, where we're expecting him to cut into Aaron Jones's workload. Last year, Aaron Jones was fourth in the league in weighted opportunities. I mean, he was getting it going as a pass catcher. He was getting the red zone touches. He still has the speed to rip off the big plays. And like you said, they gave him starter money. They gave him a 2-year huge contract. So I think the immediate reaction is we see what Jordan Mason did last year, and assume that he's just going to do that again in Minnesota. But we have seen a lot of running backs find success under Kyle Shanahan and then go somewhere else and not do much of anything at all. So I'm not concerned in the slightest. If there's any sort of discount happening right now on Aaron Jones because of Jordan Mason, I'm taking that.
I think we're already getting one, and I think it'll increase as the buzz of this move grows a little bit. And I'm going to say, just in terms of the passing attack, in Kevin O'Connell, I do trust. He seems to be very good at this, but there are legitimate concerns. I'm with you, not for Jefferson, but for the rest of that crew. There are concerns in New York where the Jets have gone with Justin Fields. I think most of the concerns are from Jets fans. Fantasy managers, we're all about this. So we love Justin Fields getting a starting role, but there are people wondering if this will torpedo Garrett Wilson's value. Will they not pass as well? I will remind those people that DJ Moore had his best season after playing with a
Mhm.
series of not very good quarterbacks, playing with Justin Fields, at least 13 games, and put up great numbers with him and Tyson Bagent. Um, are we overstating the case here?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, Garrett Wilson is just a good football player. And I don't really get too worried when you're looking at these types of guys. I mean, we do this every single year. We get worried about quarterbacks, but good players are going to find ways to produce. And I know Garrett Wilson, the production hasn't really been there, whether it's, been poor quarterback play or splitting touches with Devontae Adams last year. It seems like there's always been a story there, but I'm still more than happy to draft Garrett Wilson as my second wide receiver. I don't know if he's a guy that I want as my wide receiver one this year that I'm banking on 20 points a week from. But if I can get him in round 3 as my wide receiver 2, I'm more than happy to do that. I think he's going to need some variance to break in his direction, like we saw from DJ Moore. DJ Moore had the most touchdowns he had ever had in a season when he played with Chicago that year. He had a lot of big breakaway plays. He had these screens where he'd break one tackle and then house the football. And I think that's what Garrett Wilson would need to kind of give you elite wide receiver one production, like DJ Moore did that year. But still, it's a really simple, boring take, but I'm willing to bet on the talent here. We know Garrett Wilson's a talented player. I'm not going to overthink it too much. Justin Fields is the one that intrigues me a lot.
Right.
If we knew he was guaranteed to start 17 games, we'd probably be drafting him as a top 5 quarterback. Of course, just like last year, though, we don't really know how long he's going to be starting there. And, even if he's winning games, if he's not doing it the way that the Jets want him to, maybe they make a switch at quarterback. So either way, when it comes to Garrett Wilson, just a talented guy, and I'm going to draft him.
Yeah, I'm gonna have shares. I want some shares of Tanner Engstrand, the new offensive coordinator there, who is kind of being groomed for that spot in Detroit, working under Ben Johnson. I think we'll see a lot of creative uses here, and maybe actually maximizing the talents of the players he has instead of trying to turn them into things that they're not. Want to turn to some running back situations. There are a number of them, and I know this is early in the year, and there's a huge draft class again. Football Guys rookie draft guide. Check it out. But let's talk about Chuba Hubbard. I feel like he was going fairly high based on what we saw of him last year in a featured role. They bring in Rico Dowdle after moving on from Miles Sanders. Any concerns for you with Hubbard losing turns to Rico Dowdle in this offense?
No, not at all. I just see Rico Dowdle as the Miles Sanders replacement. Miles Sanders wasn't doing much of anything last year. They clearly trust Chuba Hubbard. They gave him that big extension in season. I think Rico Dowdle, them going out and signing him, just tells us that Jonathan Brooks probably isn't playing in 2025. We saw that late
Yep,
season
exactly
re-tear of
that.
the ACL, and I think that's all that tells us. Chuba Hubbard has developed into a very good running back. There were some
Yes,
questions about his ability to run through contact early in his career. I don't know if he's just been, listening to
he's
heavy metal
answered them.
music or
He's answered the
hitting.
questions.
Yeah. He's doing a lot better than he was early in his career. I think Chuba Hubbard is clearly the guy here. Bob, you could probably rattle this off the top of your head. I don't know if you know where he's going in drafts right now, but when I did my early season rankings, I have Chuba Hubbard projected to be an early 3rd round pick. I think that's where he deserves to go. And like we're saying with a lot of these other running backs where people are overreactive to the backup, if there's any sort of discount on Chuba Hubbard because of Miles Sanders, I'm gladly taking that discount.
He has been going as running back 17. I have a ton of him, even and I'm hoping the price goes a little lower with Rico there. I talked to Mike K from the Charlotte Observer last year in the middle of the season. The
Yeah.
comment he had stuck with me. As coaches love his violent style. He's
Mhm.
perfect for what they want to do with this offense, which is take the heat off Bryce Young. Look where that got them. Turn Bryce Young into a thing. Najee Harris goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. A career year coming.
I think so. Yeah, it's you look at the offensive line, they've got one of the best in the NFL and they've got legit pass catching weapons. Of course, they've got Justin Herbert, a superstar who's going to keep defenses honest, and I think the glaring hole was at running back, but we saw this Frankenstein backfield last year of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal. It didn't matter. They were all efficient behind this offensive line, and Najee Harris is no slouch. I think that people have this weird perception of him because he doesn't have the big breakaway plays, but he is never a liability in the run game. He's always going to keep his legs turning and pick up those hard yards. And I think you put him behind this offensive line, it's really easy to envision him getting 300 plus touches, 1,500 plus scrimmage yards. Career year, I think if you're talking fantasy, is going to be tough because he had that
Right.
rookie season where he was just catching nonstop passes from Ben Roethlisberger. But I think a career year as a rusher, absolutely, it's really easy to see that. They could potentially add to this backfield, but I don't know what it is. Najee Harris, man, he just feels like such a just he fits with this Harbaugh team. I don't know what it is
Right.
about him, but he feels like a Harbaugh running back.
But he's a tough runner. Like, okay, 3.9 yards a carry isn't fantastic, but 1,000 yards a year,
Yeah,
like I think at least 6 touchdowns, usually more per season. Doesn't miss time. All those things are great. Right now, he's running back 27th on underdog. I want that all day
yeah.
long and not worried at all. So Jalen Warren though gets like his run of the shop, unless you're worried about Kenneth Gainwell cutting into his workload. What are your expectations there? He's going a pick after Najee Harris right now.
Now, this is one that's really, really tough to speculate about because Pittsburgh, on paper, looks like a team that is primed to draft a running back early. And I've already thrown around the five big names that I think are really going to shake up backfields. But Pittsburgh, with this glaring weakness and with what Jalen Warren does well, it seems like they might be able to wait until day 3 and draft a guy like a Damian Martinez or a Cam Scattaboo to fill the Najee Harris role. And if that happens, you're looking at potential, RB2 upside from Jalen Warren every single week, but he's not going to be the 300 touch guy that people are hoping he is right now. So I think Jalen Warren's a guy that I'd be a little bit more tepid on. And if I've got a dynasty manager out there who thinks that Jalen Warren is going to the moon after free agency, I'd probably try to sell him where I can. But I just look at the upcoming draft and I look at the different roster holes that are out there, and I'd be shocked if the Steelers make it to round 4 without adding a running back in the draft.
I will as well, and we'll see how that plays out. Arthur Smith's usage of personnel always interesting to say the least. So we'll see. Jalen Warren, I think it was a fair value where he's going. I know I've talked to beat writers in Pittsburgh who feel like the coaches last year thought he was the best fit for this offense. We'll see if they may use him like that. Javonte Williams goes to Dallas. Miles Sanders joined him there. This is just setting people up if you're drafting early for massive failures. I feel definitely not interested. I feel like the moves aren't done here. If there's a team that's going to draft somebody, this seems likely. Are you with me?
Yeah, and Jerry Jones has learned a little bit on running back values since that big Z contract. I
Correct.
doubt that they're going to spend a first round pick. They might on Ginty, but either way, again, we keep talking about how deep this running back class is. And when I see a backfield with Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, I see a need for a running back.
I do too. My favorite guy, Anthony Richardson, gets the competition in Daniel Jones. Is this real competition or was it just a name to make it look like competition?
I tweeted it out right after the trade went down that I wouldn't be surprised to see Daniel Jones starting by week 6 or week 8. And I was surprised a lot of the responses that I got were he might outright win the job in camp. Anthony Richardson, I've got a lot of worries about him. You looked at what he did on that very small sample size his rookie season, and we look at the, EPA and the fantasy points per drop back, and there are a lot of really alluring things about Anthony Richardson, but we've seen him getting outplayed by Joe Flacco now. There's a lot of concerns that I have about Anthony Richardson, and then Daniel Jones. This is a better structure that he's going to be placed into than he ever had with the New York Giants. So I could see him potentially, getting half a year under KOC, kind of learning from Sam Darnold's mistakes and whatnot. Now getting a fresh start with Shane Steichen, a guy that we know wants a running quarterback. Daniel Jones has those legs to run, as we saw earlier in his career. So I don't know if this is necessarily a good thing for Anthony Richardson. I could see them easily making the swap to Daniel Jones at some point.
Yeah, I've been one of the biggest Anthony Richardson stands out there. I've been super disappointed. I see the things that I want him to be. We've seen. We see the
Mhm.
flashes of him, those 20+ point starting games, but they are few and far between. And he needs to develop. And I don't know if the team is going to be patient enough to develop him. So I'm not going to lie. I have some shares already, some quarterback 3 shares in best ball just for that upside. I expect them to fail miserably. And I'm with you. I'm not 100% sure he's going to end up being the starter. But if he isn't, I think if you're people like Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, you should be sweating heavily because I don't think this was the planned outcome. Uh, in Las Vegas, I feel like the entire shift of scenes, and I did a radio show in Vegas. I do one semi regularly. We were talking about this. It's the shift is to competence, right? You
Mhm.
bring in Pete Carroll, he hires a professional coaching staff. Whatever you thought about Chip Kelly as a head coach, over the years, his offense has evolved into like a standard pro style offense. They bring in Geno Smith. They're doing a lot of things that make them look very competent. Would it be competent to use your 6th pick overall in Ashton Genty?
It's such a tough conversation to have because, the immediate gut response is no, you never spend that type of pick on a running back. But then you look at the running backs who have gone top 10 over the last few years, and it's Bijan Robinson, Jameer Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott. It's like the worst guy of that bunch is Leonard Fournette, a guy who was a very productive, starter for over half a decade. So I don't no, I think some of the concerns about Jinty with size, being 5'8", you do have to look at some historical outliers to find running backs who have been great at that size. But you look at the production in college, I don't think it's incompetent. And I think that given how good he is, some team is going to do it. I just want to throw this out there because Dave Richard tweeted it a while ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. Zach Charbonnet, his coach in college was Chip Kelly. Zach
Here we
Charbonnet
go.
was drafted by Pete Carroll in Seattle. They've got Kenneth Walker right now, who Clint Kubiak has been raving about. I think it would make a lot more sense for them to offer a day 3 pick for Zach Charbonnet than it would for them to go out and draft Ashton Ginty.
Yeah, I think we'll see Tyler Lockett end up there too. It would like
Probably.
none of those things would surprise me at all. All right, Dave. I think that's it for this episode of On the Hot Seat. And once again, I want to thank Dave Kluge. You can follow him on the X Machine at his name at Dave Kluge. Get the rookie draft guide from Football Guys. Version 2 is free. Don't mess around. It's good stuff. Footballguys.com, rookie guide. What else do you got going, Dave? What do people need to be looking for?
Busy time right now, weirdly enough. I always think that like the off season is when we get to
There's no
slow
off
down, but
season.
now I'm doing the Dynasty show with Jeff Bell. We got 2 episodes coming out a day or 2 episodes coming out a week. I'm not that busy. Alfredo Brown, we've got the Football Guys fantasy football show coming out. I've got another mock draft coming out next week. I'll be doing round 1 there. And then of course, just looking forward to the draft coming up in less than a month here. And then we'll have some clarity on these depth charts that we've been discussing, as deeply as we can over the last couple of weeks. But hopefully,
Yep.
some of these roster holes get filled.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to seeing what kind of information comes out the next month. There's going to be a lot of smoke blown people. We'll be here for it. I'm Bob Harris. You can get my fantasy notebook. Many of these topics, you can dig deeper on the things we talked about today and find out more detailed information on all of them in this week's edition of the notebook. It's out every weekend. You can get it completely free, even if you're not a elite subscriber or a premium subscriber at Football Guys. Get that. Get the sign up for the newsletter. The email comes out. We've got 2 really great editions every week, keeping you caught up on things until we go back to daily. Nothing else like it in the whole world. Nothing else like Football Guys. We'll see you here next week for another episode of On the Hot Seat.